Doc Slab Audio on music production and audio engineering. Welcome to Doc Slab Audio and our Insights series. I do believe this is the 33rd video in our Insights series, and on this video we want to talk about how harmonic content changes at different octave ranges. This is a huge issue that I've seen so many times that people have issues with, whether they're dealing with VSTs or live instruments that they're capturing, or vocals, or they're dealing with drums or anything, that whenever you're dealing with any type of sound, that it has a harmonic envelope. And you try to look at it as ADSR or something, but a lot of times it's a lot more complicated than just a straight ADSR that we talked about in that video about ADSRs. But the concept here is that people get confused sometimes, that they think this is the harmonic content in the envelope of sound of a vocal at any octave range. That is not true. So the concept here is, whenever they're dealing with anything in the studio or anything in their composition, that it's not taken into consideration. So that basically, whenever you're working with instruments, a lot of times you want to keep certain instruments in certain octave ranges and certain other instruments in different octave ranges to keep them separated, so that you can equalize them properly and sound sculpt them properly, so that you can work them properly, which is very difficult to do when you're doing melody lines, and sometimes very difficult to do when you want to use them in other octave ranges. Does that make sense? But no matter which way you go there, as long as it's taken into consideration, sometimes that I'll even EQ different. Some section will have, like, let's say I've got this pad, this synth that I'm using in the C2 octave range, but on this other section I'm using it in the C4 octave range, and so I might equalize it a little differently. I might sound sculpt it a little differently. This can be vocals, this can be anything, which, the more you think about it, it can be a little complicated, and you don't want to get lost in it, or you get dying in the mixing, in front of the mixing board, trying to fix things and adjust things and equalize things with automation and sound sculpting to the point to where it's just ridiculous. But it's something to take into consideration, because if you take, like, I've got this pad here, and this is just a pad synth, and if you look at it on here and you see this is like C0, and you look at the harmonic content there, and you really look at the shape of the envelope of what's happening there. I mean, get a really good look at it, and then I go to like C1 octave range, look how the content changes, and look how the harmonic content changes and the envelope itself. And as I go up to like C2, look how different the harmonic content is and the envelope itself. I'll go up to C3, look at the change of the envelope of sound. I go up to C4, look at the change of the envelope of sound. I go up to C5, look at the difference in the envelope of sound. Does that make sense? And I can even go up higher, up to like C6, and you see the difference of the envelope of sound. So you have to understand, this concept means that as whatever you're doing is moving around in different octave ranges, it's going to have different harmonic content, and it's possibly going to need to be equalized differently, sound sculpted differently. Any effects you put on there might have to be done differently if it's done at different octave ranges, whether you're dealing with vocals, guitar, synths, whatever, drums even, that they can be different, and it's something you really want to take into consideration. And when you're composing, a lot of times trying to keep certain instruments in certain octave ranges so you can do them justice. when they're moving all over the place, it's like you have somebody trying to EQ, and they're trying to EQ the vocalist, and he's all over the place, or the synths, or whatever, that it makes it more difficult without using a lot of automation to follow him around in the octave ranges doing what shouldn't be happening, right? But then again, with the same breath, you don't want to kill yourself with over processing and sucking the life out of it. But if you take that into consideration and you really think about it, there are applications there and consequences whenever you're doing any type of producing, anytime you're doing editing and processing, anytime that you're working on mixing things together, that there's different harmonic content with any of those instruments at different octave ranges. And it's a really cool, experiment for you to kind of delve into a little bit and get out your VSTs, get out your guitar and your bass and, your drum set or whatever y'all got, and start checking that. See how it changes. So whenever you're doing any work on them in any way, shape, or form, or mixing them together, what you might do differently because of the difference in harmonic content whenever some instruments playing in different octave ranges. It's a fairly complicated issue, and it's more about pointing it out to you so that something you can delve into a little bit and take into consideration, so that it's a consideration as you're working through your productions whenever you're working with any instruments, especially when you're working with the same instruments in different octave ranges, that it's something you really want to take into consideration. And when you're composing, trying to keep things in 1 or 2 octave ranges so that any work you're doing on them doesn't does justice to it, instead of it being all over the place to where it makes it very difficult to follow it around with EQ or the sound sculpting you've done or effects you're doing, or are affecting things differently at different octave ranges and it sounds differently. That can be true sometimes, and sometimes it's not that big a deal, but at least you are aware of it, so you take it into consideration as you're working through your productions. So peace, self-love. I certainly hope you enjoyed this next video on our Inside series, and I will see you in the next video.